Yeah, you're good.
I'm good.
You're good. I'm good. Hello?
Hello.
Jack Johnson?
Is it me you're looking
Fee fi fo
for?
fum. Fee fi fo fum.
We actually heard that song on the radio today.
What does Ron Burgundy say?
He's well,
No,
that's a
like
big
when
question.
when
says
he's
a lot.
testing himself.
I don't know because he says so much.
He says so many different things.
Scotch. I love scotch.
Yum yum yum. Down into my belly.
I hurt my shin today. We left.
You hung out with James Martin
No, that would have been my knees.
and other things.
No, but we have that boot bench at the entryway of our house, and so
The thing that's been there for a couple of years.
yeah. So I opened up the drawer so that our girls could put their shoes in, and then they didn't close it, and I was holding the youngest because she was asleep, and I just walked right into the open cabinet, and it hurt. And you don't feel bad for me like you should. You're not even paying attention.
Huh? I was just acting like a good husband. All right. I'm so excited. So, do we figure out the way this works?
We really haven't, but let's start with prayer.
And then just go right to it?
Well, no, because we need to do the introduction as
All right.
well.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Okay, so
So
last week,
So where are they?
where who?
The listeners, the viewers. Where do they come to?
I'm so lost. Is this like, are you asking me to give us a plug?
Yeah.
Welcome to Catholic
There we
Guardians,
go.
an unapologetically masculine podcast for Catholic men.
By Catholic men.
Together, we will return to tradition. Okay. I was so lost. I was
Because
like,
they need to know where. Because
they
we do
don't-
prayer and
it's not like they can't see the logo right here
if they're listening to it
or
on
here
the
or here.
podcast.
They had to search Catholic Guardians to get here.
You still got to say it.
Catholic Guardians. Catholic Guardians.
Thank you.
Catholic Guardians. Anyway, so last week we did a podcast, and
Last week we recorded it.
Yes,
Has not been posted.
it has not yet. Well, it has been now. By the time everybody's listening to this,
It's the one before this.
after this,
So when is now?
today.
Okay, then.
Well, not then. It's now, which is going to be then. But when they hear it, it will have been there.
We'll go back to then. We can't. Why? We just missed it.
Okay. So we reached out to Instagram, and everybody was asking us. Well, we had asked because you and I had the idea, right?
Mhm.
Stupid things that we had believed as young Catholics,
Yes.
and what we feel, what the church teaches, and how to kind of prevent that. But then we were kind of drawing a blank, so we reached out to Instagram, and we got a buttload of really good things.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Some were very inappropriate. I'm not going to say what your name is, but you were asking about the... Very funny question. Anyway, so we had some really good questions. We had some dumb questions, some Pachamama questions. Pachamama, yo mama. But
Yo Mama's in the river.
But thankfully, Frankie pulled it out. That was really bad.
That's bad. You might have to edit that one out.
I'm probably gonna.
You may have to do a long.
I'm gonna use the Dumb and Dumber. Most annoying sound in the world. Okay, so here is the question, and it was asked one way or the other several times. Was our thoughts on Biden being denied, or Biden and being denied the communion.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really good tie-in, because how that conversation on the last podcast started was a conversation between me and my wife about things that we have learned as we've grown in our faith. And the biggest thing that I had to overcome was my views on people not in communion with the church, even if they're doing it in a respectful manner, receiving the Eucharist. And so I don't doubt that Joe Biden or at the
Uncle Joe.
We'll just come out and say it right now, any outwardly Democratic politician.
Well, you can't be a closeted Democratic politician.
Correct. So I don't deny that they're doing it with a level of respect, but the fact that they're doing it while not being in full communion with the church
is an issue.
Correct.
Is a gigantic issue.
So do we want to...
I was really hoping that I was going to be able to make this little rosary while you were talking, because you're so boring, but you're so boring. I can't even count to 2.
Is it that I'm boring, or this topic is... I just want to start it off right now. This is going to be a very divisive topic.
I don't think it's going to be divisive.
I think it is, because I think there's a...
Especially, so let me
especially
finish.
with modern...
Stop interrupting! Comrade, can I have the floor?
Yes.
Thank you. I don't think it's going to be divisive. What I think it's going to be is one of those moments where you're confronted with a truth that you are not willing to accept.
How is that not divisive?
Because we are not being intentionally divisive.
Mm-hmm.
And the language that we're using and the topic that we're talking about is not intended to cause division, but union, right? Union with Christ, not with a political nature, right? Going back to when Christ came and was speaking, Christ said that he came to turn fathers against sons and daughters and mothers against each other. And
he was going to set the world on fire.
He was. And how he wishes it was already ablaze. I believe, and not to compare ourselves to Christ, but I believe that conversation that we're about to have is going to be on par with the same substance that his was. The point Christ was making was not that he wants to cause division, but that he wants to cause union. But through that, it's a zero-sum game. You can't hold two opposing beliefs at the same time.
The truth and people accepting the truth is going to cause division, because some people are going to accept the truth and other people aren't. It goes back to one of the things that my father-in-law has always said when he was coming back to the church, and then something that my wife just read, reading one of the
one of those books,
one of the books from Archbishop Fulton Sheen, where he said to multiple people that would write him letters, this is not a church problem, this is a you problem.
Yes.
The church is set. This is right and this is wrong. You have a problem with the truth, and you're accepting a falsehood.
Now, here's the deal. With this, there are people who are going to say that people in the church, namely certain bishops and the Pope, our current pontiff, have done things that, in essence, exemplify the opposite of what we're about to say. And our position, at least my position, is that while they are doing what they believe to be true, it is in actuality the opposite of not only church doctrine, the canon of the church, but it's against any real investigation into the Eucharist, your state in receiving the Eucharist, and the purpose behind the denial of the Eucharist from a priest or a bishop, right?
And really, when we get into it, actually how damaging that is.
The being denied or not being denied.
The not being denied. How damaging not only is it for the recipient of Holy Communion, but for the priest who is distributing Holy Communion as well. How damaging it is for both parties involved.
And for the laity on whole.
Yes.
Right? And we'll really get into this.
So I don't know if we really said it, because I started saying that it was going to be a divisive issue, but what we're going to talk about today truly is the denial of the Holy Sacrament of the Eucharist to people in a open state of mortal sin.
And
that is a really, really big.
But it's not just like
Well-
let's get really specific. It's not people that are just in an open state of mortal sin. It is denial of the Eucharist to Democratic politicians
Mhm.
and openly supportive Democratic voters
Yes.
and communist voters, any hardcore left wing
Left-leaning political ideology.
and their voters, their donors, their supporters
Mhm.
should be denied. And we'll get into the fine tune. So this
Yeah.
is don't just shut the podcast off right now. Listen to the whole thing. And really, like, if you disagree with us, please reach out because we do want to have a conversation about this
Yes.
because your soul is on the line.
Yes. But in really what it comes down to when you talk about these left-leaning ideologies, it comes down to the conflict.
Three things.
The conflict comes from abortion, euthanasia,
And assisted suicide.
and assisted suicide. So those three things are really what puts the Democrats and other left-leaning political ideologies in opposition
Mm-hmm.
to receiving Holy Eucharist.
And the reason we're so general in our accusation of it being a Democratic politician is simply because in order for you to claim to be a Democratic politician with a D next to your name, which is short for in order for you to have a D next to your name, you need to agree with the DNC, the Democratic National Committee's party platform.
and the platform
And the
openly-
platform explicitly states
Yep.
that abortion is a fundamental human right that all women should be available to have.
Yes. Same thing with the Communist Party platform as well.
We didn't get
And
time
then-
to look into every single party
Not every
platform.
single one, but
However-
with the Libertarian Party, it's a little bit more murky.
Like I don't want
with the
to murder
language.
anybody, but it's totally fine if you do.
Yeah, so the language gets a little bit more murky. The reason that I did leave the Libertarian Party is because so many of the politicians are vehemently pro-choice, and I
Mhm.
could no longer rectify that.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't ascribe to any political party now. I'm a registered nonpartisan, but
Which you're gonna have to change after our conversation with Melissa.
but the Republican Party is the only U.S. political party that has it in their platform that it is an unalienable right from conception to death that you have a right to life.
Natural death.
Natural death.
Right.
Yep.
So with that, let's get into it.
Yeah.
All right. So there are
So how did it come about? So what exactly happened?
So Uncle Joe, Creepy Joe, Joe Biden.
And he's the
So-
creepy uncle that everybody has. For those of you listening, he just got up and rubbed my shoulders. Spiritual attack.
Man. Okay. So anyway, those of you that didn't hear, I was rubbing his shoulders with my mouth next to his ear, and my beard was
Softly caressing my cheek.
molesting your cheek. Hashtag I do not consent. Anyway, so
But anyways, Uncle Joe.
so Bishop or not Bishop, Joe Biden. I'll give him this. Former Vice President Joe Biden was denied the sacrament of Holy Communion by a
Parish
badass,
priest.
ballsy parish priest.
by a real stand-up individual who is out there fighting for people's souls.
And I think it's just, again, like, this is something we've talked about in the past. There has been an attack on the Eucharist
Mhm.
as of late. There was the Pew study that came out a couple months ago.
Yep.
We did a podcast about that. But there's just a general understanding of a general lack of understanding of the Eucharist.
Yeah.
And it's so, like a lot of us talk about this in conservative Catholic circles. It's ridiculous for us that these Democratic politicians who quote unquote claim to be Catholic receive openly the sacrament of the Eucharist
Mhm.
in what we know it to be a state of mortal sin.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that Our Lady of Good Conscience talked about. She said, and she gave an example of how every single one of the seven sacraments was going to be degraded in the 20th century, or starting in the 20th century. And when you have people who claim to be Catholics and claim to be openly and practicing Catholics in good standing, quote unquote, good standing, air quotes, going up to receive the Eucharist to an outsider that is sending such the wrong message. That is
Not
sending
not
such
just
a
to
contrary
outsiders,
message
but
to what? You're right, not just to outsiders, but to people within the church that have been poorly catechized.
and this is the deal, and this is what I really like. The Protestant church has been calling out Catholics and calling them to the mat. Like, there have been Protestant pastors who have been coming out and saying, if this is actually what you believe, then what happened is correct. Because the left, the liberal Catholic movement, Cardinal Dolan, Pope Francis, all of these lefty bishops and cardinals are saying, well, you know, it's charitable. Who am I to deny somebody the Eucharist? Like, you're the effing guy who should be doing it.
Who are you? You are the person.
You're the guy
with the holy digits that can transubstantiate the host.
Like, if
it's not you, then
who else? Yeah, exactly. Like, if it's not you, then who? But we really do have this this frustration when it comes to these Democratic politicians. I'm messing with things that I shouldn't be. Democratic politicians receiving the Eucharist, and we don't do it out of hate or jealousy or anything other than a love for Christ and not wanting to see his precious body degraded and sacrileged so openly,
so severely, and not just a love for Christ, but a love for these people as well, because as we'll talk about, receiving the Eucharist in a state of mortal sin like that
sends your ass to hell.
You, even though it is quoted and it's talked about by the church fathers that the Eucharist is a medicine. Yes, it is a medicine, but if you don't receive it in the proper conditions, it's going to send you to hell. It won't lead you to salvation. It will lead you to damnation. So it's out of love for these people as well, because as much as I might disagree with somebody on the left, I don't want them to go to hell. I don't want anybody to go to hell. I want people to spend eternity in communion with God. But when they do something so blatantly wrong that will lead them into the pits of hell, I want somebody to stand up and say no.
No. Yeah. So Joe Biden was denied the Eucharist. Just like flat out denied the Eucharist by this priest, and Catholic internet
was very divided.
Yeah,
you got some people that are like, canonize this guy right now.
Like that. The fact that he stood up in of itself is a miracle.
Yeah,
literal miracle.
Like how incredible. But so you had the more conservative, more orthodox side on which we fall and our families fall, that are just in support of this priest
and this movement,
and the fact that it was, it's somebody that most people probably have never heard before outside of this parish. It's a parish priest who decided to stand up and say, no, I will not be party to sin. Mm-hmm. And then you have the other side, the more modern Catholics, who are saying, well, we need to err on the side of charity and we need to err on the side of mercy.
It's not even that. They don't even acknowledge that there's an issue.
Yes, and when we talk about it, when we bring in St. Thomas Aquinas, I understand that. I get it, but I don't fully support it, because when you talk about distributing and receiving the Eucharist in a state of mortal sin, there are two parties there. It's not just on the person receiving it. There's also a stain that will be put on the person who is giving the Eucharist.
And a small sidetrack. This is one of the reasons why conservative Catholics like ourselves really do emphasize the fact that we should not be using extraordinary ministers for the Eucharist as often as we do now, because it really does allow for this abuse of the Eucharist to continue, right? Yeah. Because the priest has not that we don't have God on our side, but the priest has a special connection with Jesus when he's there as the priest, the presiding.
In persona Christi.
He's in persona Christi. He's Jesus Christ on the altar. If you're Fred or Susan up there and you just Purell your hands and you see, creepy Uncle Joe, there's less of a chance that you'll stand up for Christ in the presence of somebody like Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Right. So, like right now, our current governor is a proclaimed Catholic and pro-abort politician.
Yeah.
And I can guarantee you that he will not be denied the Eucharist in any of the churches that he attends, if he attends church.
Yeah, definitely not in that diocese.
Not in our diocese or in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
Right, I just kind of get. Well, everybody knows.
Everybody knows because we talked about it so openly with
Melissa. Bishop Calvo. I guarantee you, if one of our, locked on conservative priests, and I'm not going to name them because I don't want them to get criticized. If one of our conservative Catholic priests denied Governor Sisolak the Eucharist, I guarantee Bishop Calvo would come down hard on that priest.
Yeah.
And it's so shameful to me that that's the state that the church is at right now. But anyway, so let's get into it.
So how do we want to start? Do we want to go over by specifically why, not targeting, but why we're calling out Democratic politicians and read the party platforms?
So I want to start with just a small little asterisk.
Okay.
This is a slightly newer revelation in as much as it being a broad stroke against Democratic Party politicians, because up until I would say the last decade or so, abortion has not been a part of the Democratic Party platform on a national level.
But it is now.
It is now. And so now it's not a new thing because we've been dealing with this for a while, but now that it's part of the national party platform, any single Democratic politician, local, state, federal, who says that they're a Democrat has to buy into the DNC platform, is subject to these rules that we're about to go through.
Yes.
So you're like, I'm sure some of you are thinking, well, that wasn't how it was 20 years ago. Or
like the old school, like when you talk about
like the JFK Democrats.
The Harry Truman Democrats, because Harry Truman was a Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
The Democrat dropped the atomic bombs. Let's just say that. But you talk about the old school Democrats, that when the political field wasn't so divided as it is right now. And I think specifically this issue, abortion, is one of the reasons why the parties have divided so vitriolically over the last 20 years.
Yeah, I agree.
Because it is a human rights issue in our time. If you can't
agree on life, there is such a divide between the two of you.
Exactly.
Right.
So let's read the platform. So this is
the Democratic
Party platform. Democrats are committed to protecting and advancing reproductive health, rights, and justice. We believe unequivocally, like the majority of Americans,
that's a lie. Well, I would assume that's one of those like fungible numbers.
Yeah. That every woman should have access to quality reproductive health care services, including safe and legal abortion, regardless of where she lives, how much money she makes, or how she is insured. We believe that reproductive health is core to women's, men's, and young people's health and well-being. We will continue to stand up to Republican efforts to defund Planned Parenthood health centers, which provide critical health services to millions of people. We will continue to oppose and seek to overturn federal and state laws and policies that impede a woman's access to abortion.
So it ends right there, right? So
it goes on.
But for the sake of our discussion, and this is something that I don't think we mentioned, which I'm actually kind of frustrated that we didn't. You can say that there are parts of the Democratic platform that you agree with and not be in sin. Right?
No.
If you believe in a welfare state, which is, so long as it's not communist or socialist, which is sinful.
As long
but
as
like if you're more prone to high taxes for a bigger welfare state, or if you're more socially democratic, socially liberal, or even financially liberal, that
you lean on the Keynesian economic side of redistribution of wealth.
That's sinful because that's theft.
But now you get into the murky
taxation is theft.
All taxation is theft, but now you get into that murky area because technically all taxation is the redistribution of wealth.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. But typically Keynesian economics, it's more of the progressive income tax, stuff like that.
So what we're going to do is we're going to confine our discussion of the Democratic Party simply and solely on its party platform position on life issues: abortion, euthanasia, and end of life assisted suicide. Yeah. Lack of care. So, and again, like, I don't care where you sit. Like, I don't care if you like welfare or affirmative action or any of those things. That's not that's not the point of this discussion. The point of this discussion is there is a political party in the United States who in its platform explicitly states that it should be legal to murder children,
safe and legal,
disabled people, and it should be fined for you legally to murder yourself.
Yes.
And what we're saying as Catholics is that not only is it wrong, but it's intrinsically wrong, and to such a level that your support, and we'll get into what that means, your support of that movement is sinful. And now that it's been conjoined with the party's platform, there's no saying, well, I voted for Democrat politician A, but they're a pro-life Democrat. There is no such thing now as a pro-life Democrat, because in order for you to call yourself a Democrat now and run as the DNC or as a Democratic national candidate, you have to abide by the party's platform.
I mean, there is some mental and ideological gymnastics, because you have people that say I'm a pro-life Democrat, but then on the other side, you also say I'm a pro-choice Republican. But here's the Republican Party platform. The Republican Party is proud to stand up for the rights of the unborn and believe all Americans have an unalienable right to life as stated in the Declaration of Independence. Republican leadership has led the effort to prohibit partial birth abortion and permitted states to extend health care coverage to children before birth. Republicans have also passed laws for informed consent, mandatory waiting periods prior to an abortion, and health protective clinic regulation. So the Republican platform stated when it comes to abortion is pro-life. Mm-hmm. But you'll have like Rudy Giuliani a couple years ago, I think it was in the 2012 election, he just got immediately shut out of moving any further in the primaries because he came out as a pro-choice Republican. But to your point, I'm a pro-choice Republican, but the party platform that you signed is
pro-life. Yeah. Which is why he got shut out.
Yeah. And so then here's the thing with the Libertarian Party, because it gets really murky. Recognizing that abortion is a sensitive issue and that people can hold good faith views on all sides, we believe that government should be kept out of the matter, leaving the question to each person for their conscientious consideation. So it's not.
I almost feel like that's worse. The government should be out of the regulation of infanticide.
So here's the thing. You're going to a lot of gospel passages. You're going to the book of Revelation, and we're back. So anyways,
more spiritual attack. Damn you, Satan!
But so the Libertarian Party platform, when it comes to abortion, really harkens back to the gospel passages and in Revelation when Christ says, "You are neither hot nor cold, but you are lukewarm, and I will vomit you out of my mouth." So it's not explicitly. I would say with the Libertarian Party,
for the purpose of our conversation, we really can't make the same claim that we're about to make with Democrats as to Libertarians.
Correct. Because it's not saying, yes, partial birth abortion is A-okay.
You'll have to deal with God in another way at your particular judgment.
If you believe in God, because I'm Ron Swanson. Which is
Ron Swanson.
The Libertarian Party can be summed up by Ron Swanson.
Okay, so
that's all the three main political parties in the United States. Those are their platforms.
Like the Independent Party, Libertarian Party, the Republicans, and the Democrats.
Yeah, exactly. And then, but when you take a look again at the left-leaning political parties, this U.S. Socialist Party, the Communist Party, they all have pro-abortive language in their party platform.
In essence, they take marching orders. Not marching orders. They ride in the wake of the Democratic Party.
Yeah,
right.
Because they're the
biggest
big brother.
Yeah, they're the bigger.
Literally big brother, because Big Brother's always watching you.
We got one of those speakers that you can talk to that does things.
Oh no! I know. Oh no!
But I don't.
It's recording all of your.
None of us have Siri on our phones.
Okay.
Siri's been disabled. So the kids can't go like, "Hey Siri."
Do you think Apple still is not listening?
Oh, I know they're listening. I want you to know what you're about to hear is 100% consensual.
Okay.
Anyway, okay, so let's get into it. So we wrote it down. There are three church documents that we're going to be referencing as to support our claim that Democratic Party politicians who claim to be Catholic should all entirely be denied the Eucharist.
And why
moreover,
their supporters need to examine their conscience.
And so there's going to be two kinds of supporters that we're talking about with Democrats. There are going to be the public supporters and the private supporters, and we'll get into the difference between the two. And what we're going to make the claim is that public supporters and Democratic politicians should all be denied the Eucharist. Private Democratic voters are still at a high risk of being in a state of mortal sin and having to deal with judgment later on, but they are still valid to receive the Eucharist without being denied, even though when they go to receive it, they're receiving it illicitly.
Correct. Yeah, but I mean that's really going to come down to the writings of Saint. That's going to come down to the writings of Saint Thomas when we get to it. So
I'm just going to say. So we're going to refer to the canon, which is the Constitution of the Catholic Church. It's paragraphs 912 to 916. We're gonna speak to Saint Thomas Aquinas in the Summa Theologia, paragraph 3, question 80.
Part 3, question 80, answer 6, because there's answers, objection. There's a lot. So great.
And then a document put out by the CDF under Cardinal Ratzinger, Pope Benedict, to the USCCB a handful of years ago about this very issue.
Yes, and that document is called Worthiness to Receive Holy Communion General Practices.
So those are the three documents. They're all free and online. I suggest that when if you have a problem with what we're saying, that you reference these documents right now. And if you like what we're saying, if you go to speak to somebody who you love, who you feel is one of these people that should be denied the Eucharist, these are the three documents that you should quote and cite when speaking to them about this issue.
Yes.
Okay, so Canon 912 to 916 states what?
So, Canon 912, any baptized person who is not forbidden by law may and must be admitted to Holy Communion. So that is just laying the groundwork. So if you have been baptized and brought into communion with the church, you effectively have a right to receive the Eucharist. 913, 914 starts talking about children and the receiving of the Eucharist, but it comes down to Canon 915.
915.
915, not 950, 915. Those upon whom the penalty of excommunication or interdict have been imposed or declared, and others who obstinately persist in manifest grave sin, are not to be admitted to Holy Communion. So even though you have been baptized and brought into the folds of the church, because you are obstinate in your sin or because you've been excommunicated or whatever, there's been a penalty imposed, you are not to receive the Holy Eucharist.
So a really easy example of this would be after Martin Luther made his thesis on, I believe it was today.
Oh, man.
Right? He did it on All Souls Day, right? Or was it yesterday? All Saints Day.
It might have been All Saints Day.
It's the day after Halloween.
All Saints Day.
Yeah. So if Martin Luther had gone to a Catholic church after being declared a heretic and removing himself from the grace of God, he would have been denied the Eucharist.
Yes.
For several reasons, all listed in Canon 915.
And then in Canon 916, anyone who is conscious of grave sin may not celebrate Mass or receive the body of the Lord without previously having been to sacramental confession. Okay. And there's more wording on that, but that's the part of Canon 916 that I really want to emphasize. So it's not saying...
we're going to reference 916 explicitly because I've had this discussion with people who claim to be hardcore, dyed in the blue Democratic voters who just say that before they go to receive the Eucharist, after they voted for Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton, they'll just go to confession. It's like, but that
I figured out that loophole.
It doesn't work, because in order for you to have a valid penance, a valid sacrament of reconciliation,
you should you should be determined to not do that sin again.
Which means you would have to have had examined your conscience and your political ideology and line that with the ideology of God.
Yes.
And not just be like, well, I voted for Hillary, forgive me, but I'm going to vote for whoever the next DNC platform candidate is, and then just go about receiving the Eucharist, because you can't do that. It doesn't work that way. It's you can't go and say, like, forgive me, Father, for I've sinned. I took the Lord's name in vain. But then you're going to go out doing it again. Now, that doesn't mean that there's a likelihood that you'll do it again, because, we're sinners and we all go about sinning. But I can't have a plan to actively go out and commit that same exact sin.
Exactly, because it's in the act of contrition. I firmly resolve to do my penance and to sin no more. If you're going to confession already because you've been voting blue, and you acknowledge that it's a sin, but in the back of your mind,
you had to go
while
to
you're in
confession early because you had to get to the Democratic
But you know
primary.
that in the back of your mind, as you're saying your penance, I'm just going to vote Democrat again.
You can't.
You made an invalid confession.
It's not a valid confession. Right?
So that's canon law. But again,
man, I bled so bad out of this nostril. It's bothering me so bad.
I mean, the canon law language is very, very strict. If you know that you are in a state of mortal sin, you shouldn't even be going to Mass.
And that comes from
St.
Paul. So there's a lot of people who don't understand where that comes from in the Bible. It comes from the letters of St. Paul. There are some very explicit languages that some very explicit passages that St. Paul uses as to support the concept that somebody who is in a state of mortal sin should not receive the body and soul, the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ in the Eucharist.
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact that if any of you have seen any of the Jesus movies, it's pretty explicit when Judas receives the Eucharist at the Last Supper. There's a very cool scene, and I don't know if this is accurate to what actually happened, but it has a theatrical value to it. After he receives the Eucharist from Christ and he leaves the upper room, he ends up vomiting it out of his mouth. Like, he ends up choking on it, and it's forced out of his body, which it's a beautiful image of what it's like to kind of balance the two. Like, you're balancing when you say amen in front of the Eucharist after you've been, the body of Christ, and you say amen, you agree not only just that is the body of Christ, but to the church as a whole, and to her teachings, her magisterial and doctrinal teachings. You're saying, I agree. But then you don't actually agree.
Symbologically, it's like, it's literally you rejecting Christ.
Yeah.
Your body is forcing it out of you.
Because you have made a mental decision to reject him already.
Yes. And
your body is just following in line with what your mind has done. Right.
And so because the Catholic Church is so explicit in canon law and the catechism and so many in dogma, that abortion is a grave mortal sin, that by being a member, especially when you're a politician and you are campaigning for that party in the United States, by being a member of that party, you are endorsing and you are a party to that sin. And that is,
and not just through some like veiled mental support. You're actively campaigning for
taxpayer dollars to go to a baby genocidal organization called Planned Parenthood.
Not just them, but any of these pro-abort groups and movements.
But Planned Parenthood's the largest.
Is the big one, right? But as a politician who is soliciting dollars, actual money,
not just voluntary dollars, but the forced dollars of taxation.
Yes. So you can't say, well, they might not agree with it, but they're not actually forcing somebody to have an abortion. No, they're just paying for it.
They're paying so that you can.
Yeah, they're paying not only for your ability, for your ability to have that abortion, but they're paying the doctor, they're paying the rent on the building, they're paying for all of it.
Mhm.
So they that's like saying I didn't murder my husband, I just paid the guy who did it.
I mean, you didn't actually do it.
You didn't actually do it. No, of course not. I just swiped my ATM card and gave him cash, right? Because I've been watching episodes of Snap lately, and if you're listening to this, sweetheart, we have no antifreeze in the house.
I'm on to you. I know how you.
I know what's up.
So now do we want to get into St. Thomas?
Yeah, let's hit St. Thomas,
Okay.
and then we'll read the letter, and then we'll just kind of not argue this out, but we'll really just hash this out, because this is a really big deal.
This is so St. Thomas, part 3, question 80. I'm going to go back to answer 4 first, because he starts questioning whether or not receiving the Eucharist in a state of mortal sin is bad. Because I have not read the Summa. I'm very much a novice when it comes to it. But for my brief...
We are Obamacare. Full-time, part-time, amateur theologians.
But the parts that I have read, he talks about everything. He has a answer to every question that you have not thought to ask of. The fact, and this is going to be a little bit explicit, but the fact that he answers the question whether or not having a nocturnal emission is cause for a mortal sin where you would not be able to receive the Eucharist. He has an answer for everything. But so
could you imagine? Hey, Tom, let me tell you what happened last night.
Not only do I already have 5 arguments as to why it's a sin, I already have 7 arguments that counteract those arguments.
We're not saying that having nocturnal emissions are sins, because it's
no, it's not.
Depending
on
what question you read. It's in the Summa.
It's in the Summa. But so he answers it. He who eats and drinks unworthily is in sin, or who handles it irreverently. Therefore, if anyone while in mortal sin receives this sacrament, he purchases damnation by sinning mortally. So yes, to receive the Eucharist while in a state of mortal sin, and then I'll get to something else right after that, but to receive the Eucharist in a state of mortal sin, and you know about it, but that's the whole thing about mortal sin. You have to know it was a grave matter, and you still did it anyways. Mm-hmm. It purchases your damnation into hell instead of salvation. And as the person who is distributing the Eucharist, if you know that that person is in a state of mortal sin, you are handling that sacrament improperly, and you are doing a disservice to that person who you are giving the host to.
Again, so let's go back to the example that I just used about the wife paying for her husband's murder. If you're the bank teller and somebody comes up to you and they're like, I need 10 grand out of my account, and you go, oh, what are you doing? I'm having my husband killed. And you go, how funny. They're like, no, I'm serious. Like, you are now a party to that crime.
You are an accessory.
You are enabling that. So the priest or the extraordinary minister of the Eucharist who distributes the Eucharist to somebody in a public state of mortal sin is wrong.
Yes. And they are sinning. Not only are they sinning themselves, but they are encouraging that person's obstinance.
Yes.
Because, if I'm not being denied,
then I must be okay.
I must be okay. And as a Catholic, you should see the Eucharist as the culmination of the faith. That is
the source and summit.
That is what separates us from the Protestants.
There's
a lot of things.
Our priests don't have face tattoos and dumb haircuts and
ripped holes in their
ripped
jeans.
pants.
So there's a lot, but I would say the pinnacle of what separates us from the Protestants is the Eucharist.
What separates Christianity from Catholicism is the Eucharist.
Yes, but so if you have the person who has the holy digits to consecrate the host, and they're treating the Eucharist so callous and indifferently, what is that doing? I mean, is it any wonder why 70% of church-going Catholics don't believe in the Eucharist?
Yeah,
or
exactly.
The true presence of Christ in the Eucharist?
It really is. It comes down to, if this is really truly the body and blood, soul and divinity of Jesus Christ, you treat it better.
Why would the person who has the power and the authority to transubstantiate it not guard it more safely?
Yeah, like the person who has sacrificed so much to be part of that process. Mm-hmm. If they're treating it so irreverently, then either it's not really what it claims to be, or it's okay to sacrilege it,
Yes.
to desecrate it.
Yeah. So now going on to answer 6, question 80, answer 6. This is where St. Thomas draws a distinction between open and private sin. A distinction must be made among sinners. Some are secret, others are notorious, either from evidence of the fact as public usurers or public robbers, or from being denounced as evil men by some ecclesiastical or civil tribunal. Therefore, Holy Communion ought not to be given to open sinners when they ask for it. But if they be not open sinners, but occult, the Holy Communion should not be denied them if they ask for it. For since every Christian, from the fact that he is baptized, is admitted to the Lord's table, he may not be robbed of this right, except from some open cause. So he is drawing that distinction. If you are sinning in private, you are not to be denied the Eucharist. But if you are sinning publicly and openly, 100% you should. And as a politician campaigning on the Democratic Party's platform, you are
That's about as public as it gets.
You are openly sinning, and you should be denied you should be denied the Eucharist when you go up to receive it.
And that's where, and so this exact question and answer, question 80, answer 6, is where and we'll get into this in a minute, about the difference between you being a Democratic voter being able to receive the Eucharist, because there's a difference between, and we'll get into the nitty gritty of it. Somebody who is so open about their support of a Democratic Party politician, and somebody who's not, and somebody who should be denied the Eucharist, and somebody who should not be, because there's a difference. I personally believe that if you plan to vote for a Democrat, you should be able to receive the Eucharist. If you vote for a Democrat, actually punch the button, pull the lever, push the button, touch the screen for a candidate who supports abortion, any Democrat, you should be denied the Eucharist, because you are in action sinning. Supporting them up until the point is a little bit iffy. Actually doing it is different. And we'll get into there's a difference between supporting somebody and enabling somebody, and we'll get into that in a minute. But I want us to finish off with the letter from Cardinal Ratzinger, Pope Benedict.
So St. Thomas goes on. Nevertheless, a priest who has knowledge of the crime can privately warn the secret sinner or warn all openly in public. So you either counsel that particular congregate, or before Mass, you get up, hey, if you are in a state of mortal sin, you should not come up and receive the Eucharist.
And you can be more specific. Hey, if you're
voting for a
X, Y, or Z, you should remain seated. Larry, I'm looking at you. Fred, Susan, sit your asses down.
Warn all openly in public from approaching the Lord's table until they have repented of their sin and have been reconciled to the Church. Because after repentance and reconciliation, communion should not be refused, even to public sinners, especially in the hour of death. So if you have a public sinner who then seeks confession and makes reparation, then there's no issue about that person receiving the Eucharist anymore.
Because they've mended the broken relationship between them and God.
So now here comes the next question. So if the person is a sinner in secret, but the priest knows about it, what should the priest do? Well, the answer is in the Summa.
Although, well, I mean, it's in. So, let's talk about that for a quick second.
Mm-hmm.
That comes from Matthew in the Gospel. If you have a problem with your brother, you bring it to them in private.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that's the first bit. If you have a problem with somebody, you bring it to them in private. First. And then you bring, one or two witnesses, and then eventually you bring it to the church.
Yes.
Right? Which, in essence, this is, we're past the stage of bringing it in private. Now we're at the point where we brought it to the church. And that's in regards to all Democratic politicians.
Correct.
This is at the point where they've been spoken to privately. They've been done it. It's been done in private with people, and now it's been brought to the wholeness of, or not to the wholeness, but it's been brought to the light of the church. And once you finish that, you'll get to the response from Cardinal Ratzinger, Pope Benedict,
Yes.
to it.
So this really comes down to, so take away the politicians campaigning aside. Now you're talking about the people who support the Democratic Party privately. So, although it is worse for the secret sinner to sin mortally in taking the body of Christ rather than be defamed, nevertheless, for the priest administering the body of Christ, it is worse to commit mortal sin by unjustly defaming the hidden sinner than that the sinner should sin mortally, because no one ought to commit mortal sin in order to keep another out of mortal sin. So what Thomas is saying here is that it would be a sin for the priest if they know that this person is sinning in secret, but they're going to deny that person the Eucharist. They are opening that person to scandal. And the priest themselves is now committing mortal sin by trying to prevent somebody else from committing a mortal sin.
Yes.
So it is sinful for the priest to withhold the Eucharist. So if that is the case, what is the priest to do? The priest is to address that person, err on the side of charity and mercy, and counsel that person privately. Hey, I saw... Because I know a lot of people are like, well, I don't want the priest in my business. Okay, well, that's their business. The job. That's their job. Their job is to get you to heaven. So if they see you driving around and you park for the 7:30 a.m. mass, and you have a Warren 2020 bumper sticker on your car, and you go up to receive the Eucharist, it is the responsibility of that priest to take you aside afterwards and set up an appointment or talk to you privately. Hey, I saw this and you did this. Did you know this is wrong? And this will cause me to withhold the sacrament from you should you do this again.
And it doesn't, it could even be like, hey, did you know that the politician that you're bumper stickering for
loves to kill babies?
And do you agree with that? No. Well, if your support is condoning that behavior and enabling that,
your donation dollars are votes for that party's platform.
Yeah. And so those babies, man, they're going nuts.
They love it.
So for anybody that doesn't know, this is my garage, and like 10 feet away is my family room, and
there are 6 children in there.
I'm gonna have to bleep that out. My wife will shoot me.
But so St. Thomas then takes it to another level because, of course, he thought of everything. So what if the priest is a non-confrontational person, doesn't want to cause that person scandal, and they want to try to pull a little fast and loose, and they're going to keep an unconsecrated host aside for them? For that person.
Little up the sleeve.
A little up the sleeve.
Little Harry Potter, little Houdini.
Well, St. Thomas says this. Yet by no means should an unconsecrated host be given in place of a consecrated one, because the priest by doing so, so far as he is concerned, makes others, either the bystanders or the communicant, commit idolatry by believing that it is a consecrated host. So if you think that you figured out the loophole, I'm just going to give them the unconsecrated host. No, because now you are committing the first sin of idolatry by having effectively a graven image of God.
Yeah, they're worshiping an image of God.
Yeah, but so all of that. So with the whole private versus public, open versus closed, not open versus closed, but open versus private sinner. The question that I really have is, and I guess it's not really a question. It's more of a statement. Yes, if you are sinning in private, you are able to receive, but should you?
Yeah. And so like
you need to examine your conscience. And if you think that it's well, I'm sinning in private, I'm going to go to confession. Okay, yes, I get that. But should you still, if you know what a grave sin it is?
But to the purpose of our conversation, we're not talking about the individual acting on their own behalf. We're speaking about how the church should act on her behalf in relation to public and private sinners.
I would say I want to say one thing about it
before we get to what Pope Benedict
said. If you are in that position, do not put your priest in that position.
Yeah, really. I think that's so disrespectful.
As a member of the body of the church, respect the priest and respect your congregation enough where you are not going to open yourself or the parish or the priest up to scandal. That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah,
on that.
which I think like speaks to any of the Catholic churches in DC. Like, what the really though? Like those priests, how do they square that, knowing that all of these Catholic politicians they attend mass somewhat regularly there in DC, and they know where they stand. It's so scandalous. It really is.
Absolutely.
All right, so Cardinal Ratzinger, Pope Benedict's letter.
The next document. So this was a memo. It was released or leaked in about 2004. It wasn't written specifically to Theodore McCarrick, but
it was written to him because he at the time was in charge of the institution that it was sent to.
So, worthiness to receive the Holy Communion, general principles by Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, prefect, Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith. So he kind of knows what he's
talking about.
So,
and this is in response to a question by American Catholics.
So I'm going to gloss over some of this because there's effectively 6 paragraphs, and these are basically summaries of what the paragraph says. So you should be conscious of the decision that you're making when you receive the Holy Eucharist. You should have examined your conscience. Am I in a good conscience? Am I in a good state to receive the Eucharist? And paragraph 2 is when it really starts coming out hard. The Church teaches that abortion or euthanasia is a grave sin. The encyclical letter Evangelum Vitae, with reference to judicial decisions or civil laws that authorize or promote abortion or euthanasia, states that there is a grave and clear obligation to oppose them by conscientious objection. In the case of such an intrinsically unjust law, such as a law permitting abortion or euthanasia, it is therefore never licit to obey it or to take part in a propaganda campaign in favor of such a law or vote for it. Christians have a grave obligation of conscience not to cooperate formally in practices which, even if permitted by civil legislation, are contrary to God's law. Indeed, from the moral standpoint, it is never licit to cooperate formally in evil. This cooperation can never be justified either by invoking respect for the freedom of others, the Libertarian Party platform, or by appealing to...
I think that statement in of itself then just loops the Libertarian Party in with the rest of it.
Or by appealing to the fact that civil law permits or requires it, and then not all moral issues have the same moral weight as abortion or euthanasia. For example, if a Catholic were to be at odds with the Holy Father on the application of capital punishment or the decision to wage war, he would not, for that reason, be considered unworthy to present himself to receive Holy Communion. Because the Catechism of the Catholic Church, I guess now it would be changed because of Pope Francis's language at the end,
and John Paul II.
But even the Vatican II Catechism says that it is still permissible if it is the only way to protect society. Mm-hmm. So it still says that the death penalty may be used by civil authorities if that is the only way to protect society.
Which is not the full use of the death penalty.
So it is still saying that the death penalty is admissible.
Mm-hmm.
So you can support or be in opposition to it, but it's not a matter of grave sin. Mm-hmm. You cannot support abortion without being in a state of grave mortal sin because you are endorsing the wholesale murder of the innocent.
Yes.
Apart from an individual's judgment about his worthiness to present himself to receive the Holy Eucharist, the minister of Holy Communion may find himself in a situation where he must refuse. That letter it's that word. It's not he should or he can. He must refuse to distribute Holy Communion to someone, such as in case of declared excommunication, a declared interdict, or an obstinate persistence in manifest grave sin. Regarding the grave sin of abortion or euthanasia, when a person's formal cooperation becomes manifest, his pastor should meet with him, instructing him about the church's teachings, informing him that he is not to present himself for Holy Communion until he brings to an end the objective situation of sin, and warning him that he will otherwise be denied the Eucharist. So, right there, it's following along the same lines as St. Thomas. This is what you do. You know that this person is sinning, but they might be doing it privately. As the priest or as the pastor, whatever, it is your responsibility, it is your obligation to take that person aside because you are the caretaker of their soul. Hey, did you know this? This is what the church teaches. Now it gets into something that St. Thomas didn't really talk about. When these precautionary measures have not had...
Pope Benedict, Cardinal
But Pope-
Ratzinger
But
continues.
Cardinal Ratzinger continues. When these precautionary measures have not had their effect or in which they were not possible, and the person in question with obstinate persistence still presents himself to receive the Holy Eucharist, the minister of Holy Communion must refuse to distribute it. So if you've counseled this person, if you know that they're in a state of mortal sin, you know that you have done what you have needed to do as the priest in counseling this person and they still present themselves, this is when you refuse. And again, this might open that person up to scandal, but at that point, the priest who has already been erring on the side of charity and erring on the side of mercy by trying to counsel that person, by trying to bring that wayward sheep home. Well, that person still is not listening and still committing grave sin. At that point, if the priest knows about it, the priest by distributing the Eucharist to that person, knowing that they have already taken the proper steps and this person is still refusing to repent, well, now the priest is in a state of mortal sin by going back to what was first said by St. Thomas. It is sinful for the priest to willfully and knowingly disregard the Eucharist in such an irreverent manner by distributing it to somebody who they're in an open state of sin. Because at that point, regardless of if they're still sinning privately, the priest has brought it to their attention. There's effectively no difference between them being a private sinner and being an open sinner.
Yeah. So that's 50 minutes of backstory on this. So let's get how it applies to people, because the question is, what's the difference between a public and a private sinner in relation to your support for a Democratic National Committee politician?
So that's the really difficult question. Is it enough to have a bumper sticker? Is it not enough to have a bumper sticker? At what point does the private sin become public?
Okay, for instance, this only relates to being denied the Eucharist for your position on a political candidate.
Correct.
But given the fact that you are unlikely to support a pro-choice candidate, yourself being pro-life,
yeah,
I find it unbelievably difficult to conceive a person who is so in love with humanity that they would disregard that belief and vote for somebody who actively seeks the destruction and death of innocent human lives. So,
excuse me.
I always err on the more liberal side of punishment as opposed to the conservative side of punishment, and I mean liberal and as in more, not less.
As in kill them all.
I think if you donate to, vote for, advertise for, speak on the behalf of,
canvas for,
publicly promote, or try to persuade your friends and family on the behalf, not on the behalf of a candidate, but for a specific Democratic candidate, I believe that you are publicly putting yourself out there in a state of mortal sin.
The question that I have is, because the priest is not following you around, and the difference between a private citizen publicly voicing their support for a Democratic candidate.
So let's give a couple hypothetical examples here. All right. So you already gave one. I'm the priest. You're the congregant.
Yep.
Right. You pull into the parking lot right next to me. I get out of my priest car, and you get out of your car,
which is a Hyundai Elantra. I don't know.
Well, I
think a lot of priests have a Hyundai.
Really? I know 3 priests. One of them has a Jetta. The other one has a Dodge Journey, and the other one has a RAV4.
Should be the Dodge Destination because it's the destination, not the journey.
But he does have some pretty BA Second Amendment stickers on his car. You know who you are, Father.
But anyway, so
So I get out of the car, you get out of your car, and I see that you've got so let's use candidates that are already have been voted for.
Mhm.
You get out of your car and it's Hillary 2016.
Yeah.
And so we'll pretend that this is the 2016 election because the Democratic National Committee hasn't elected their candidate yet.
not yet.
Right. So I get out and I see that you're a Hillary Clinton supporter. And Hillary Clinton is obviously an outspoken proponent for abortion.
Mhm.
I would have to be like, hey, Vin, I would really like, if there's enough time before Mass, I'd be like, hey, can I talk to you in my office just for a minute?
Yes.
I'd go in and I'd be like, hey, did you know that Hillary Clinton is pro-abortion? And that by voting for Hillary Clinton, you're materially and substantively and formally endorsing and supporting the abortion of human lives.
Mhm.
And you would say whatever it is that you'd say, and then I'd counsel you from there.
Yes.
Because you could say yes, you know, or no, you don't know.
So in that hypothetical, you as the priest, you have already counseled. I go up to receive the Eucharist.
After I've counseled you.
After you've been counseled.
I distribute the Eucharist.
Exactly. And then what do?
I tell you that you should remove that bumper sticker.
Hey, have you thought about this? I see that you still presented yourself.
I would say next week, there's 2 bumper stickers. There's a newer bumper sticker. Right?
So we get into the obstinance. So now that person is showing, I am showing that I am obstinate in my sin, and now I'm probably just doing something to egg you on as the priest. Oh, you didn't like my Hillary 2016 bumper sticker. Well, how about my Hillary 2016 and my coexist sticker right next to it?
I would be like, hey, look, can we talk again? I really do need to talk to you. And then so now we're going to play off of what Pope Benedict wrote.
Mhm.
You tell me no. Now I deny you the Eucharist.
Yes.
I don't actually have to meet with you because in the letter, Pope Benedict says that all you need do is attempt to, or if you're unable to meet with them. So in the case of a politician, I'm sure it's impossible to get a meeting with Joe Biden.
Yes.
If you're a Catholic priest, right?
Mhm.
Unless you're Theodore McCarrick. And you just go in with your little fingers. Hey, Joe. Right? So I'd be like, hey, I really do need to talk to you about those bumper stickers again. And you tell me no. I go, all right. Then I deny you at the Eucharist.
Mhm.
I deny you in the line for the Eucharist. And moreover, I tell the extraordinary ministers that you're not allowed to receive the Eucharist
Mhm.
because they're under my purview.
Yes.
And I don't want them to be complicit in a sin.
Correct. But you see them doing that, you then remove them from that post.
Yes. Okay.
Um,
So that's one example, is the bumper sticker on the car. The next one is you're the priest and you're driving by a political rally and you see me walking with a Hillary 2016 banner
Mhm.
into a Hillary Clinton convention meeting, right? Just happenstance, you drive by and you see it. Same exact process,
Yes.
right? And then the next week, so you would still give me the Eucharist, correct?
Yes.
The next week, I show up with a Hillary bumper sticker on my car.
Or a Hillary t-shirt.
God, that would be such an ugly face to see in Mass, right? Or I have a Steve Sisolak or a Beto O'Rourke or Pete Butt Pleasure Begajeg or whatever his name is.
So in this hypothetical, you are again showing that you are not only in knowledge of what you are doing is wrong, but now you are obstinate by continuing on a path of, well, now I'm going to show you because I know more than you. So then as the priest, I would let you know first.
What if I was obstinate in the meeting with you? The initial interaction.
I think because
I will distribute you the Holy Eucharist today. You need to meditate on it for a week.
would still think that the priest should err on the side of giving that person the Eucharist because they have to understand when you are, because this person could be a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat.
Just raised
from day one. And for somebody, this may be the first time that they're being told something like this. And so to hear that,
I'm just making sure that I'm still in camera.
Okay. And so for somebody to hear that for the first time, they may react
Yes.
in a very
Displeasurable
violent
way.
or aggressive way because they don't like being told that what they're doing is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But the priest shouldn't take that one interaction as, oh, well, this person is a lost cause.
Okay.
Because here's the thing. That person, like, it might not be the first week, but maybe they start having, like, so maybe they show up. They haven't put a second bumper sticker on, but they still have the bumper sticker. But the priest doesn't know what that person is doing in their heart and in their mind. And they may be going through a discernment process. So say it's week 2, and the person then still presents themselves for the Eucharist. I would say that the priest would administer the Eucharist and then ask to meet with them afterwards.
And counsel them again.
And counsel them, hey, I said this, I let you know this, you did this. And that the way it would open up the conversation. Well, Father, I'm really discerning what you're talking about. And
then as the priest, they should advise them to remove themselves from the Eucharistic
so
line.
I'm really thinking about what you said. You made some good points, but I'm still not sure. And then, yes, okay, why don't you not present yourself for the Eucharist?
Avoid the appearance of impropriety.
Yes.
Okay? Don't force me to deny you.
Yes.
Don't force yourself to commit a sin. Abstain.
Correct.
Okay? So another one, I would imagine, could be, I come to you. You're the priest.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, priest, father. My next door neighbor, Schmuckatelli, just asked me if I was going to support them in support of Hillary Clinton. And we had a really long conversation, and they seemed to be a really pro-choice person, and they really do love Hillary Clinton and killing babies. I don't know what to do. Can you help me? Because it confuses me that they are pro-abortion, but at the same time claim to be a Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
So you could get information that way. Somebody comes to you just out of concern for the soul of their friend, their fellow Catholic, their brother or their sister. You would then, again, the same exact process. You contact them. Hey, Schmuckatelli, heard you're a piece of like to talk to you.
I heard you really like killing babies and seeing them bleed. I think that's wrong. Can we talk about why that's wrong?
Right? So I think there are a number of ways that a priest could be brought this information. Mm-hmm. And again, the conversation that we're having right now is not about you not receiving the Eucharist on a personal level. It's about you being denied the Eucharist by a priest or a distributor of an extraordinary minister of the Eucharist, right? So this isn't like because in all honesty, if you're a Democrat, you should be withholding yourself from the Eucharist.
Yes,
and discerning what it is that you actually believe, because you have two conflicting ideologies.
Yes.
Because the ideology of Catholicism and the ideology of the Democratic Party are in direct contrast to each other.
Correct. I would say, going back to one of the hypotheticals, if as the priest, so it's that second time, you've already counseled the person, they received, you talk to them about it afterwards, they present themselves again for the second time, you counsel them again, and they're like, well, you made some really good points, I'm still discerning it, and then you have advised them, hey, do not come up again, because you're going to put both of us in an awkward situation, and in a state of mortal sin should you do this again. If that person then goes up again without having gone to the priest and been like, hey, without having sought confession, or without going to the priest and saying you're right, can we do this confession thing now? If that person then goes up, that is when I would say that the priest should deny that person. Because, hey, I know you're going through the discernment process. I advised you not to do this, but you are being obstinate now. So I would say, as the priest, that is when you deny that person.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously the counseling occurs only for people, non-politicians, who are democratic in nature.
I mean, unless you can advise unless you can, but you're probably not going to be able to,
right?
Yeah.
Hey, Barack,
stop killing babies. Let's talk.
Right now, let's talk about the issue that comes up from this. Pope Francis invited 2 Democratic American politicians to receive the Eucharist from him.
Bad call.
Bad call, right?
Bad call.
Which goes back to one of our earlier episodes when we talk about papal infallibility. He was not infallible when he screwed that up.
No.
Right?
But it also goes back to what we had mentioned in this episode, earlier in this episode, and what we've talked about in episodes before.
Pope Francis is an idiot.
What message are you presenting when you do something like that?
Yes.
What are you presenting to people who are poorly catechized in the church or aren't even a part of the church at all? When you do something like that, and I get that, you know, with Pope Francis, his whole pontificate so far has been about mercy, which I'm on board with. I'm all about mercy, but
there is no justice with mercy.
But allowing somebody to walk further into sin under the guise of mercy, quote unquote, is not mercy at all. It is more merciful to tell that person you are in a state of mortal sin, and as such, I will deny this to you because I love you and I care about your soul being eternally damned. And I care about my soul being eternally damned because now I'm an accessory to your sin. And that's one of the 7 ways that you can be an accessory to sin. It's more merciful to deny and to, in a compassionate way, explain this is why I'm doing this, than to try to pervert.
Yeah, you're enabling
that
them.
Sacrament.
Yeah, you're enabling them to pervert the sacrament itself. So, obviously, where does it go from here? So, how do we fix the problem? Because the problem is easily fixed. This is not us saying that you have to be a Republican. Right? If you're a Democrat in your political ideology, there's something that Pope Benedict wrote in his letter. It was either in his letter or is in the Summa. You become a conscientious objector.
It was Cardinal Ratzinger.
So, and this is something that I wanted to say then, but I think it's better time now. What happens when the Republican Party turns to be pro-choice? What is the voter left to do? They're left to abstain from voting in an election because they're left between evil and evil.
Yes.
Right? Actual evil. And we're not talking about the lesser of two evils. You're actively participating in evil, right? So if you're somebody who really truly believes in the Democratic platform outside of abortion, euthanasia, and the assisted suicide portions, you must choose to either reorient your political ideology with the institution, the only American institution that promotes the same belief in human rights as the Catholic Church, as not the Catholic Church, as the Catholic teaching, as the dogma of the Catholic faith, the magisterial teachings, or you become a conscientious objector.
And you seek to reform your party from the inside.
And you do not condone that behavior by voting for it.
No, it's where Martin Luther went wrong. He pointed out at that time there were some issues within the church, but instead of going the St. Francis route of doubling down and working to affect change from within, Martin Luther left and started his own heresy. And so I think that would be the difference. Like, we're not saying that you have to be Republican, because I'm not Republican.
Yes.
But if it comes down to an R or a D next to somebody's name when I'm voting, I'm voting for the party that does not condone the wholesale murder of innocent.
Now let's talk about Republicans who do support abortion. You can't vote for them either.
No, you would have to abstain from voting for them.
You'd either write in or you'd have to abstain from voting.
Correct.
Right?
Because what it comes down to is, even if on 99 issues you agree with that person, as Cardinal Ratzinger wrote in that letter, not all moral issues have the same weight as abortion and euthanasia. So you might agree with them on economics, you might agree with them on welfare, you agree with them on city infrastructure, on whatever.
Okay, so I mean, like,
But-
we'll use an example,
Okay.
right? I'm gonna bleep
You're-
that whole. I'm gonna erase that whole bit.
You're
There can be times where you have a candidate who does 99 out of 100 things really well, but one massive thing that's wrong, and those 99 do not outweigh the one.
correct.
So if you have somebody who's good on money, good for the community, good for the rights of people, for the vast majority of people, and I mean, they look on paper like a great candidate, but they're pro-choice, not just pro-choice. They actively endorse the murdering of innocent children. You cannot vote for them because that moral issue itself outweighs all of the others combined.
Because if we don't support life, what do we support?
Yeah, and so
what does it matter if your economic policies are on point if you don't think that children should live to experience those economic policies?
So you know Trey Gowdy, right?
Yeah.
I love Trey Gowdy. I don't agree with him on one thing, but it's a very important line because it speaks to what we're talking about. He said, so he's come out in the light of some of these mass shootings, and I use quote because I hate the term, and some of these public shootings lately, and said that there needs to be a call for gun control and a reasonable control of firearms, right? And he said, what good is the Second Amendment if you're not alive? Because the right to life trumps all the others, right? Now, I don't agree with him that gun control is the answer to solving the right to life issue, but the line itself, if you were to take the Second Amendment out and replace it with something else, it does make sense. I don't much care about where you stand on welfare, if it agrees with me or if it doesn't, if your policy on life disagrees with me.
Yeah.
I would rather you be a poor, homeless degenerate than dead. I would rather a politician's policies be so abhorrent that they cause homelessness than elect a politician who actively seeks the abortion of innocent lives. That's how much, and I mean, in that case, I probably wouldn't vote. I'd probably write in.
Yeah,
right?
because now you're talking about oppression of the poor or something along those lines.
Life trumps everything. It trumps all of it, right? So when this discussion comes up, so many Catholics are just immediately turned off because they're like, separation of church and state. And this is something that I talk to a lot of people about because a lot of people don't really actually understand this. There is no such thing as being able to diverge your political and your ideological and theological selves. It is impossible. It would be as easy to do that as it would be to divide the cells in Jesus Christ's body that were divine and human. What nucleus of Christ was human and which one was divine? What atom or subparticle of Christ was divine versus human? It would be easier to do that, to separate those physically, than it would be to divorce yourself of your political and your theological beliefs. Because if we really do believe that this is the truth, the magisterial teachings, the body of the church is true, because it was given to us by Jesus Christ, that shapes everything about our life. I am not this way because I am this way and then I found the Catholic Church. I am this way because the Catholic Church teaches what it teaches, and I embody those teachings in my life in a unique way. I'm not unique and then I found the church and they just happen to square each other. The church shapes who I am as a person because I need to right myself with the direction of the church in a... I square my life, my direction with the direction of Jesus Christ and the teachings of the Catholic Church. Because the Catholic Church has been somewhat political lately, so I need to be very careful when I say what about the church that I'm squaring myself to. I square myself to the... I can't think of the word. Undeniable it's a teaching that it's not wrong. It's
The infallible?
Thank you. The infallible teachings of the Roman Catholic Church. I square myself to those. When we're voting, you have to square your political ideology to the infallible teachings of Rome. You can't diverge yourself. And if you do, and I'm saying it's physically possible to vote one way and believe the other, but it's not, it doesn't make any sense. So you can't say that it's easy to do that or that it works, because it doesn't work. There is a disorder to voting the opposite of what your faith life believes and leads you to believing.
Yeah.
And Joe Biden's a piece of crap. And you should have been denied the Eucharist a long time ago. And politicians en masse should be being denied the Eucharist en masse. And we need to command this. We need to commend this priest because
we need more like them. We need more priests to stand up and to make that hard line in the sand, because if the people who can transubstantiate the host are not going to take it seriously, why are the rest of us going to?
Now there's a Bishop Paprocki, I'm massacring his name, came out a couple months ago and said that all Democratic, I don't know what he said, I don't want to quote him incorrectly, came out and said that pro-abort candidates should be denied the Eucharist. There is a difference between what the bishop did, which is amazing, and what that priest did.
Because the bishop came out and said we should do this, the priest did it.
The priest stood there. Could you imagine the friction? Joe Biden comes up and the priest is like, no. Could you imagine what Joe Biden would have said? Teddy liked it this way. What? Could you imagine the balls on that priest? Literally, like
because I think everybody can think of like how embarrassed they would feel.
Yeah, seriously.
Like if that were to happen to you, I think you can all think of like the time that you embarrassed yourself in front of your class or in front of a group of friends. Well, magnify that to a faith community. And
everybody knows who you are.
And everybody knows. It's not like, oh, I'm just a kid on the school ground. No, I was the vice president of this country for 8 years, and this guy, whom probably nobody outside the parish knows, is saying no
to me, which I think is also
who has probably nobody has ever said no to him except maybe
Barack Obama, the National Party, when maybe he wanted to be the president,
maybe a handful of interns, maybe. Allegedly,
every young girl who seemingly creeps away from him,
but somebody who has never been told no before, and a very humble priest is telling him no. I think that right there, that beautifully encapsulates Catholicism. The humble are powerful, and the humble are made powerful through
Jesus
Christ.
Yeah, it's powerful. I mean, it gives me chills to think about the cojones on that priest to just stand up for Jesus that way.
Yeah.
Literally. Like, and Christ doesn't need to be stood up for because he's Christ, but we need to safeguard Christ's sacrifice and do it justice and respect the sacrifice. And we talk about that in other episodes where we talk about kneeling for the Eucharist, receiving on the tongue. All of these things are kind of null in comparison to people who shouldn't be receiving the Eucharist being given the Eucharist, right? I would rather you receive in the hand than a politician receive at all.
Right? A politician who is in full support of the Democratic Party platform.
Yes. Or a pro-abort politician.
Yes.
Right? Because that, again, Republican candidates are pro-choice at times. And those guys shouldn't be given the Eucharist either. They should also be roundhouse kicked in the Crotchosaurus Rex out of the party. Hashtag I'm taking my party back. But really, if there was an uproar when that Pew study came out about the number of Catholics who believed in the real presence of the Eucharist, because every single intelligent Catholic that I've heard talk about it believe that number is inflated, and not by Pew, but by the people that were actually talking to the researchers. that there had to be a number of people who were giving the answer that they know should be the answer given versus people who gave the answer that they actually believed.
Correct.
Right? It's like when a judge says, like, okay, so you punched him in the face. Was that wrong? Yes, Your Honor. And in your mind, you're like, should have hit him twice. It was wrong to hit him once.
It was wrong because I didn't do it enough.
Didn't hit him hard enough, right? So that number is at a bare maximum. It's that high.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably much higher.
Probably much lower.
Lower. There are probably fewer Catholics reported that actually believe
Mm-hmm.
in the real presence. But to have some priests stand up in a time where the Eucharist is being en masse attacked and the church is being attacked, right? Like all the times I hear political talk from the church the church is saying things in a way to make as little waves as possible so that the church doesn't get attacked politically. The church doesn't want to lose its its nonprofit status. Mm-hmm. Melissa talked about it here in one of our last episodes. The church is about to get legislated against in almost every state. And so the church wants to rock the boat as little as possible politically so that it avoids staying below the high line of the ridge so that it's not silhouetted against the moon, mm-hmm. right? So that it's not seen. But this priest, God bless his soul, stood up and said, in the name of Jesus Christ and on behalf of Catholics, no. He didn't say that with his mouth, but with his actions, he stood up for Christ. He stood up for Christ's sacrifice, and he stood up for every single one of us who are willing to martyr ourselves in the name of Christ and in the teachings of the magisterium of the Roman Catholic Church.
Yeah. And God bless him. We need more.
Yeah. I think that's it.
I think that is.
That's bad.
Yeah.
That priest is a bazanga. He's
that priest is masculine.
Be manly.
What else is there?
What else? So we're not going to do our shameless plugs because our babies are inside and they're fading. I just got a text message from my wife. They're at each other's throats right now.
Cool.
So stand by on the Instagram, Catholic_Guardians. We've got a handful of awesome rosaries coming out just before Christmas. With that, you want to do a Hail Mary in Latin?
Yep. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. God bless. Have a good night.
God bless. Have a good night. And priest, if you're listening to this,
power to you.